Welcome to the Trebitsch Lincoln Conspiracy Theories, Part 2 of 3. Theory 4. Trebitsch, Lloyd George and Basil Zakharov associated on matters of oil and political intelligence. Richard Spence claims Trebitsch's journeys in service of Rowntree were secret intelligence gathering for Lloyd George. He became George's advisor on oil, and this brought him into contact with Basil Zakharov. Zakharov was a Greek, one of the world's leading arms dealers, also known as the Merchant of Death. In the run-up to World War I, he worked in Russia, South America and Spain. Often he sold guns to opposing sides. He manipulated the sale value of Maxim machine guns by circulating lies about their production and presenting faulty goods at trade shows. And having gotten rich from Maxim, he made sure that the failing company were bought out by Vickers, making him once again a primary financial beneficiary. Spence is again citing Donald McCormick when he says, "A triangular association existed among Zakharov, Lloyd George and Trebitsch based on the fact that each knew a secret about the other. Zakharov, for instance, knew that Trebitsch was a spy, and not just for himself and the little Welshman, but also for the Germans." McCormick believes that Trebitsch began selling information to the Germans as early as 1911. Let's look at the evidence for, beginning with the years 1906 to 1909. Rowntree's European research was transparently carried out at Lloyd George's request. We have no record of letters or meetings between Trebitsch and Lloyd George, who was then president of the Board of Trade, involved in railway and merchant shipping regulation, and that in itself is a magnet for conspiracy. Next to Lloyd George was Sir Edward Grey as Foreign Minister, who Trebitsch had only minimal contact with in the form of letters. How about the next level down? As a hypothetical intelligence gatherer, Trebitsch would have had to went through the European ambassadors, who did form a loose intelligence network. Of course, he insisted he was a spy, and backed it up with newspaper articles and books, woven in with his own travelogue. Trebitsch's spy puts me in mind of Rob Newman's line about Sidney Riley. How could Riley have been the world's most famous spy, and still remain any good whatsoever as a spy? Didn't that defeat the purpose, if he was famous? Zakharov, meanwhile, kept in contact with Europe through his managerial position at Vickers. He's believed to have been behind a letter reaching Vickers Paris from their German shell company, excuse the pun. Paris was instructed to send out a press release suggesting their government improved military spending to keep up with German rearmament. Zakharov spent most of his time in Russia. Their protectionism laws required domestic industry to be involved in the arms industry. So Zakharov oversaw an arms production complex which drew funding as a subsidiary of Vickers. In 1908, Lloyd George became Chancellor of the Exchequer and was slowly being drawn into the arms race of the coming war. Zakharov made a literal killing from it. He joined Vickers' board of directors. In 1915, Lloyd George became Minister of Munitions, and the two formed a strong business relationship. Not much is known about Zakharov in the years preceding the war, but he did have links with Poland and the Ukraine, countries on the border of Old Galicia, where Trebitsch was mining for oil. theory that the British quest for oil contributed to World War I is a strong one. I'd urge you all to check out Rob Newman's History of Oil performance. Newman has become a comedy cousin to George Carlin and Mark Thomas, and he presents an ironclad case, which, in summary, goes like this. The British seek to thwart the plans of the Berlin-Baghdad Railroad, with the first mass deployments of the war being sent to the oil-rich area. Returning to the conspiracy theory of Trebitsch as Lloyd George's oil advisor, I think it's hard to make a case here. Lloyd George had his hands full at home pre-war. The People's Budget, the Lord's Revolt, the Irish Issue. There's conceivably little wait of time for Trebitsch, unless we use Trebitsch as a defining rod of where not to find oil. Spence and McCormick placed Zaharoff and Trebitsch as intimates as early as 1909 and certainly by 1911. This also seems unlikely. Trebitsch's dual interests as oil entrepreneur and Member of Parliament make prime fodder for esoteric story, as does the greater secret they knew about one another. But it seems to me the authors are practicing a form of guerrilla ontology. This is a process of exposing readers to the radically unique and engineering questions in the brain. It's a key component of any conspiracy theory. Guerrilla ontology washes the brainwashing. It pushes against certainty and creates cognitive dissonance, giving us new ways to experience and adapt to reality. For example, Trebitsch's travels were information gathering. He was involved in international shit-stirring to suit his own ends. He did claim to have made arms deals for the Chinese. The linking is barely circumstantial. I give this theory points for effort, but it relies on Trebitsch's own tall tales to stand up. Verdict? Not true. Theory 5. Trebitsch and Crowley were counter-initiation brothers. The source for this one is René Guénon in a letter to a contemporary in 1936. Guénon was a great inspiration to Houghton, who linked Anglican curate-era Trebitsch to the Ordo Templi Orientis, aka the Golden Dawn. In 1900, Aleister Crowley was initiated into the Dawn's outer circle, but cast out of the group soon after. He travelled to Mexico, India, France and Egypt, and was in China while Trebitsch settled down in sleepy Appledore. Before we get bogged down in who did what and who didn't, let's return to René Guénon and the meaning behind counter-initiation brothers. Guénon was a French writer on metaphysics, sacred science and symbolism. Where initiation relies on metaphysics and the spirit as foundation of the world, counter-initiation is the opening of the psyche without the spirit. Counter-initiation is a distraction of lucid dreaming, astral projection, and the like. Activities which can look spiritual to the uninitiated, but in this case are only surface and showy effect. It is a form of mock spirituality, Guénon says, which turns religion on its head and provides delusions of the New Age. So this one doesn't actually fall under conspiracy theory as we've been considering it up until now. It suggests Crowley and Trebitsch were birds of a feather in religious insincerity. As Crowley rejected his Christian faith, Trebitsch rejected Judaism. I find it hard to believe that running as MP for Darlington, Trebitsch did not embrace a power in Rowntree's Quaker identity. Both were sexually promiscuous despite marriage. Each created their own meta-narratives. That is, they rebuilt worlds around them. Crowley, very obviously in magic. Trebitsch as an international spy. Trebitsch used his counter-tradition Chow Kung identity for sex with an unnamed nun, at least one. Crowley used magic to get him syphilis. Both used charisma and performances to secure patronage and enjoy great experiences, much as I'm doing with you now. But however insincere they were, both used and abused belief systems in order to climb their ladders. Verdict? Guénon's theory is watertight. Each were responsible for the widespread process of subversion of traditional values. However, it is unknown if they ever met or even knew of each other. Well, in that case, it's worth wondering about. Crowley was, it's said, a British spy disguised as a pro-German in New York. Trebitsch, as double agent, wasn't successful in penetrating German intelligence. But they even had the same contact, Franz von Papen, at the American Embassy. Crowley pitched his services to von Papen in late 1914, only months before Trebitsch did the same. However, Trebitsch got himself locked up while Crowley toured the States and crossed into Vancouver. In July 1915, Crowley put on a publicity show in front of the Statue of Liberty and declared independence for Ireland. A year later, Britain imprisoned and subsequently made martyrs of the movement's leaders. Among those interred was Roger Casement's friend, Gerald Hamilton. Hamilton was pro-United Ireland, a writer, a homosexual, and a frequent thorn in Britain's side. In 1932, Hamilton was living in Berlin. A communist, he introduced his landlord to a number of political figures. His landlord was Crowley. Fast forward a year. Crowley is in London, and Hamilton, in Shanghai, meets Trebitsch. They apparently had several meetings, including one where Hamilton introduced Trebitsch to the English bibliographer A.J.A. Symonds, who wrote The Quest for Corvo. This connection from Aleister Crowley and the Temptation of Politics by Marco Passi. Crowley and Trebitsch's routes through Europe would seemingly cross a number of times in the 20s and 30s. Rome, Paris, Nice, and Berlin. At the least, they appeared to have just missed one another. Theory 6. Trebitsch and Hitler conspired as counter-revolutionaries. Bernard Wasserstein relates in Secret Lives how Hitler and his wingman Dietrich Eckart met Trebitsch very briefly at the end of the Kapp Putsch. His source, if I recall right, was Eckart's diaries. Hitler and his Nazis used the revolt in Berlin as a trial run for the Munich Putsch 2 years later. Erich Ludendorff was among those who took part in both. Other historians and conspiracists have gone further in linking the future Führer and the many-faced missionary. In 1996, Henrik Kardel released his book, Adolf Hitler, Founder of Israel, Israel in War with Jews. Kardel was a reserve German lieutenant who received the Knight's Cross for his actions in the storming of Leningrad. He recognized a gap in post-war Germany's literature market for a nation re-examining itself in a way that was new, spectacular and unknown. Kardel has it that Trebitsch and Adolf became bosom buddies and conspired together to big up Hitler and big down the Jews. The story even draws on the Frankenberger tale. Frankenberger was allegedly the name of a Jewish family Hitler's grandmother worked for, and the tall story says she might have had a child out of wedlock with the family's 19-year-old son. And this might have been Alois, Hitler's father, who was illegitimate. This is a photo from Kardel's book and an edited version of pages 51 to 55. They met in Munich's Bat Bar in the 1920s. A stocky gentleman, his little black eyes glancing at a waitress's ankles. Close friend of the poet Dietrich Eckart, who published anti-Jewish paper For a Good German, written in a German style cultivated by Eastern Jews. Hitler was paying for the beer. Trebitsch said exaggerations about Jewish people are their own fault. Their worldly god is money. They don't know love. They only want to defile the body. Hitler asked what he thought of Palestine, and Trebitsch ordered 2 more beers. Then he told Hitler excitedly, "The National Socialists and National Zionists unite!" Hitler said, "Same means, different aims." Trebitsch then talked excitedly about the Balfour Declarations. Only a lovely letter to Lord Rothschild. Trebitsch said the Britons should give them land, though more pressure might be required. And how about the Eastern Jews? Who will smash the Warsaw Ghetto? This hiding place of the underworld deserves. What now? Inquired the curious 30-year-old party speaker. I will tell you what. Trebitsch intimately put his fleshy hand on Hitler's lower arm. I know who you are. Frankenberger. What do we Jews of the Reich, Hungary and Austria have to do with the bug-ridden Jews in kaftans over there? Hitler pulled his arm away. Never say Frankenberg, or I will yell loudly all about you, Moses Pinkeles from Hungary. Trebitsch ordered another beer and brought out 30,000 and told Hitler to count it. Within 1 month, the Volkelschacher Beobachter, which was the name of the People's Observer, will be mine. Then Trebitsch got up and took his coat. Anti-Semitism can only be of value if the Jews take it into their own hands. From yours? Asked Hitler, looking up. No, from the painter Lieberman, a Jew like me. Hitler stared into his empty mug. How right he is, just like an artist, he mumbled, and got up too. In 1921, Hitler bought the newspaper for 100,000 marks. To this amount, his friend Moses Pinkelez, alias Trebitsch Lincoln, contributed 30,000 marks, and the rest came from other Jewish sources. Administrative duty was assigned to Dietrich Eckart. Since that day, Hitler was not a pauper anymore. Trebitsch Lincoln served as one of the best anti-Jewish secretaries of the Observer. Trebitsch was accused of many dubious and outlandish connections in his lifetime, but the Moses Pinkelez story appears to have captured the imagination of post-Israel commentators like rabbits from wildfire. It is literally everywhere. The men with Hitler do bear a similarity to Trebitsch, particularly the one in the foreground, but it isn't him. Whoever Moses Pinkelez was, if he even ever was, he now appears to be synonymous with Trebitsch. Despite this, Pinkelez is mentioned in none of the official records on Trebitsch, and appears to have been imagined from thin air. I found Cardell's book via a podcast called The Rape of Justice, The Rothschilds, Hitler, Holocaust, Israel and Zionist World Government. That's the title. The podcasters say that Cardell is in the habit of concocting stories to make points for analogy. I would guess it's another form of guerrilla ontology, offering up the metaphor that Trebitsch was damaging to Judaism, and that Hitler had no scruples about where he got his help from. Trebitsch had very little money in 1920 to 21. He was a freelance journalist and a fugitive. When he was finally promised a big payout from the Czechs, it never appeared. In actuality, Hitler was focused on Munich for much of the 20s, giving speeches and getting in prison, by which time Trebitsch and Bauer both were spending their time in Asia. Next to no evidence supports this shaggy mutt plot. Verdict? Nah. Join me next time where I delve deeper into Trebitsch's links with secret services and Chinese banking. This video has been brought to you by Patreon and my subscribers Peter Duncan, Miguel Soero, Sean Duffield, Joan Carberry, Andrew Bolster, Phil Weir, Arslan Hyder Ali, James Gumbel, Michael Daly, Linda Harley, John Robbins, David Annette, Richard Barr and Peter Hetman. You can find me at Andrew Luke on Twitter and various other jaunts around the web.